Okay, this is Travis Wayne Goodsell, and I hope I had the microphone turned on so you can hear me as I go through the signs of the last days, or the second coming as found in the Bible. I'm in my stellarium, and I will go through how this works. There's the moon. It was just full a few days ago, and we'll see all the stars. Erase the Earth. Put in the constellations and the lines for the constellations. Okay, and then we need the timer. And in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, and I probably should have the book open so you can read it, but there's a number of signs in there. But we will go to the birth, or the impregnation, actually. That occurred just after the presidential election. Let's highlight the moon to point out when the full moon was. Okay, it was around the 14th of November, 2016. And there's, I should have had the, you can't see my little cursor, so I can't tell. Alright, so I'm going to have to describe it for you. In the constellation of Virgo, you will see Jupiter. Jupiter is entering into the womb. Now I say that because previously it had been lowering into the womb from the head past the breasts and into the womb. And it's going to be in the womb in retrograde for an extended period of time, about 10 months, because September is the birthday. And so this also is when the moon was a supermoon. Supermoon is when the moon is the closest to the Earth. And so that helps us with the signal. Now the reason why Jupiter is now in the womb, which corresponds to the man-child, or male child, as is correctly translated from Revelation chapter 12. The reason why this is this impregnation is because the sign in September only occurs in September 2017. It does not occur going forward, backward in time for many, many thousands of years that can be identified and may likely have never occurred previous. And the tilting of the Earth is part of that reason why it has never occurred and never will occur again. Okay, so this was after Trump was elected president, though, as we all know, Trump was not elected president. It was a sham, to use Brett Kavanaugh's word from yesterday's hearing. It was a sham election. The Russians had altered votes, because there's no way after the pussy tape that Trump had the greatest amount of female voters. I believe he said 52%, voting for him, especially when his inauguration was dwarfed by the Women's March against him in his election. And so we know from that alone that there was something fishy going on with the election. And as the investigation has revealed things over the course of time, we realize, yep, Trump is an illegitimate president. So this is significant, that the man-child is symbolically impregnated or conceived right after the sham election of the United States of America. And it's significant that it's the United States of America, as I'll get into with the coming sign. Okay, we'll go on to the next one, I guess. The next one, the major one, I won't go over each and every single day of the year and compare what happened. I'll just go over the major signs. Now in Revelation 12, there's talk near the end of a flood coming out of the mouth of the dragon. And let's see, I believe it was February 17th. Where's the sun? Sun's way over in Copernicus. Okay, so that means I was sure it was on the 8th through 11th. That's very curious. Oh, right. It's when the moon is a full moon, not a new moon. New moon is for solar eclipses. Full moons are for lunar eclipses. And let me get to the full moon. Yeah, it's on the 11th. And you'll see the full moon is over Regulus in the constellation of Leo. Let me show you here a little better. The moon has the red lines coming out of it, and Regulus, the king star, thus Regulus is the name. Regal with the Greek ending us, or the Latin. Latin also has us, and so it could also be a Latin word. But it's the king star, and this is significant. So you see Jupiter is still in the womb, even though according to the drawing it looks like he has emerged, but that's not the case. The drawing does not correspond with the symbolized body of the Virgo. Okay, so Leo, the king star Regulus, it is the symbol of Jerusalem, symbol of the Jews from the tribe of Judah, of which David was a member of family member of such a tribe, according to the Old Testament. And so the Jews often associate Leo with them and their religion. So any signs that occur there, they freak out and get paranoid over. But we're dealing with the United States as the country for the symbolisms spoken of in the Bible, as I will get to with a future sign here. And so on February 11th, 2017 was a partial lunar eclipse over the constellation Regulus, and so that's significant because this was, let's see, a couple weeks, 2.5 weeks after, almost 3 weeks maybe, after Trump's inauguration. And this has to do with the transition that John the Revelator is talking about. He says that the man-child is to be the ruler of the world. And so we just had a sham election of a man who is claiming to be ruler of the world. Or at least at this point in February, he's at least claiming to be in the highest position in the United States, even though it's a Supreme Court justice that has term for life, not the president. But Trump will later reveal that he admires the Chinese president for being emperor for life, and he is jealous of Putin for winning another election, which his election was a sham election, as the news caught several people voting numerous times and other tampering with voting votes. So it's clear that Trump wants to be the ruler for life, and I think February 11th, this was around the time where he fires Comey, wasn't it? Or was that later in May? Oh well, anyway. We eventually get the Mueller investigation, who is uncovering and arresting and convicting several people now for involvement with Russia. And the ones who are pleading guilty to conspiracy with Russia. Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort, the second time around, in their pleas, they plead guilty to conspiracy with the Russians against the United States. And that's significant because they're pleading, and thus they're getting lighter sentences when treason is a capital offense, meaning the death penalty. And so the prosecution is going after a bigger fish, and that bigger fish is going to get the death penalty. And so that's significant. But we have Jupiter hovering in the womb, and we have the full moon is a partial, and that indicates a wounding. The ancient Egyptians saw eclipses, both solar and lunar, as being a wounding of the eye of Horus. Horus is the Egyptian god who is the son of Osiris, who was the original king of Egypt, who was murdered by his brother Set, and Set took over his throne and ruled Egypt in darkness and disorder. And Horus had to flee into the wilderness, which is significant because John the Revelator specifically talks about the man-child and the woman fleeing into the wilderness, exactly as the Egyptian story tells. And then when Horus is fully grown, or in this case on the birthday according to John, he is to emerge to go and battle Set to take back the kingdom from the evil uncle and restore his father's kingdom. And this is symbolic of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ came to earth. He was to be the ruler, and thus he's been called the King of the Jews, or mocked as the King of the Jews in his sham trial. And he is murdered and ascends to heaven, and the church, which Ephesians describes as the wife of Jesus, is shattered. There are no more apostles, they're all died off, so only the bishops of each congregation are the ones leading their own separate churches. And so the church is shattered after Jesus' death. And then you have a collection of the churches under Constantine. And Constantine is not the symbol of Horus. He is the symbol of Set, the uncle, taking over the kingdom of Jesus. And so thus there is a need for a restoration of a future person to restore the kingdom of Jesus to the earth. And then you have Martin Luther, much later on in the 16th century, who symbolizes the man-child but doesn't fulfill the man-child. Excuse me. I just woke up, so I'm a little groggy. And so there's lots of symbolisms indicating the coming of the man-child to restore the kingdom. And again, John the Revelator gives us the precise date in chapter 12, the sign of the woman, as it's called. That's when Jupiter exits the womb of Virgo, the woman. Okay, so if I didn't cover it, so in the Egyptian religion and culture, eclipses represent a collapse or death of if it's the sun eclipsed, it's government. If it's the moon eclipsed, it's religion. But since the sun is not always eclipsed, the moon is eclipsed on a monthly basis with its waxing and waning phases. The moon takes on a trumpet role in the form of a shofar horn, and it's a symbol of a message being given. But I'd also like to point out that the symbols do indeed have to do with government and religion. The kingdom is governmental and religious, a theocracy. And in the United States, we do not have a theocracy. We have a separation of church and state. And so this is significant when we deal with the signs, because the signs indicate that they knew, back in the days of theocracies, that there would be a separation of church and state, and that both the kingdom, which I've just revealed to you is the United States, and the religion, which would therefore have to be a religion in the United States. So it's not the Catholics. Catholics have already split apart. They've been shattered into the Protestant Revolution churches. So all of Christianity are not the Church of Jesus that is to be restored. None of the Protestant churches are restoration churches, even though they're symbolic of that. The only problem is you can't have multiple churches. The Bible itself says one faith, one religion, one baptism. Not dozens upon hundreds now. And so that's significant when you're trying to interpret the heavens. These ancients understood very clearly that it has to do with a specific religion in the United States, because that's where the signs occur, is over the United States. And I think we can get to that one because there's no major sign until the big major sign of 2017. And we shall go forward in time to August. And yes, August was when we had the total solar eclipse over the whole United States. Since, what was it, 1909 was the last time that occurred. And the 21st. Okay, and then we need to get the sign into view. Look, there's a dark spot on the sun with the red lines indicating that it's the moon over the sun. And that's because that's when the total solar eclipse over the United States occurred. And it looks cooler. We've got to get to where the eclipse occurred, so we'll go Independence, Missouri. Okay, and then go back to when it occurred. See, look at that. Isn't that awesome? Okay, then we need to go back a few minutes. And look at that spark. That's awesome. Okay. Wow, that was a great day. I was stuck here in Utah, so I only got to see it as a partial. But got the glasses, got the appropriate glasses, because many people are getting fooled on Amazon with a certain company that was selling bogus glasses. And I made sure to get the t-shirt, which came from China. But you'll notice it's by the star, just like the full moon was. That was a partial solar eclipse. And then Mars is up by the mouth of the lion, and Mercury is the opposite of Mars from this eclipse. And there, it's right next to, there it is. Regulus just popped up in the words there. It's right next to Regulus, the king star. So there you have it. A total solar eclipse by the king star, where we just had the lunar eclipse, or partial lunar eclipse, back in February, during the time that the man-child of John's Revelation is in the womb of the woman. And I'd have to go back to February 11th to show you what Mars was doing, to indicate to you that Mars here in this time and age is representing the leader, or what will be soon to be the leader of this particular church in the United States. And I knew this by the event that occurred of a religion in the United States and the one to be the leader in a future sign. And so I was able to make the identification of Mars as a result of that. And in a future sign, I was then able to identify Mercury as the leader of the United States, who is Trump. Mercury is the messenger of the gods, and he carries with him a trump to blow his message. So Mercury is identified as Trump, and the symbolisms from the conjunctions in the various constellations bear that out, confirming that this truly is the Trump representation. So here we have the sign of the sun, the book of Joel, and Jesus quotes from Joel, and John the Revelator in chapter 8 talks about it. It's the darkening of the sun. And how do we know that this date of all other dates where there have been a total solar eclipse is the sign referred to in the Bible? Well, you need a confirmation sign. That confirmation sign will happen in the next month in September, because John gives us precise dates in the future of when all of these things are going to happen. The other indication that we have to confirm that this is the date to be looked for, we'd have to go into the Egyptian religion again. In the Egyptian religion, like I mentioned, eclipses refer to death or collapse, and refers to the battle between Horus and his uncle. And in that battle, Horus has his eyes wounded. Thus, it's symbolized by eclipses of both the sun and the moon. The sun being the right eye of Horus, the moon being the left eye of Horus. Eclipses are darkening, and when a moon is darkened during an eclipse, when it's a special eclipse, not just the monthly darkening as the new moon represents, it turns red. And so thus a lunar eclipse is a blood moon, whereas a new moon is just a dark moon. And so we understand that the Bible is telling us of a blood moon, a lunar eclipse, not just a regular cycle new moon. And we have the total eclipse, which is the sign of the sun, at the king star, which is the crown, or one of the star crown in the crown of the woman, because Revelation talks about the 12 stars on the head of the woman. That means the constellation Leo, which anciently had designated 9 stars, indicating that there are 3 more stars to appear. And that also is a symbol of the identification for the particular church in the United States, because there were 3 deaths during the 2014-2015 blood moon tetrad with a solar eclipse that occurred in March, all of which were on Jewish holidays, which is significant. So I won't get into that in this video, but I've written about it and published that on Amazon. I can't remember the title, but if you're interested, I'll look it up and I'll comment or reply to your comment for requesting to know which one it is. Yeah, there were 3 deaths in this particular religion of religious leaders, and thus they needed to be replaced by 3 new men. And so that is another clue as to which religion this was. Okay, also, on the 21st of August, 2017, which also confirms that this is the time frame for the signs to occur, is that on this date is the ancient Egyptian religious calendar date for New Year. And it's not just any New Year, but it gets to be an extended year, because this is the year that the month of Thoth gets added at the end of the calendar period. The religious years are not 365 days, they're 360 days, 12 months of 30 days each. And every 7 years, I think it is, they have to add a full month to the calendar year, and that month becomes the month of Thoth each and every time. And this particular year is the month of, with the addition for Thoth, and it is the new year when the total solar eclipse occurs. And so this follows the story from the Egyptians of Horus beginning his battle with his uncle Set, and he gets his eye wounded. And this has never occurred before, or will never occur again, on the Egyptian religious New Year. And that's significant. All of these signs from the Bible are rare signs. They are not commonplace signs. And thus the Bible is telling us there is no confusion. No one should miss that these are the last days spoken of and prophesied about. And so here we have, on the ancient Egyptian religious New Year, a total solar eclipse at the star Regulus over the whole United States, from Oregon to the Carolinas, and passing through Independence, Missouri, which I think is closest to the center of the United States, because I don't know of any popular towns in Kansas. But it's also significant that it's Independence, because of the role that that city played in the history of the United States with the religion referred to. And so that's also significant that this total solar eclipse passes over that city. Also a warning that, hey, this is it. This is what the prophets have all been prophesying about. This is the time. And so this is a significant event that took place. So I hope you guys understand that it was not just a cool thing that occurred. It was awesome to the infinity power event. I can't express fully how important this event was. Also significant, and in the evening after this event occurred, as Trump tried looking at it without glasses on, dumbass, he gave a speech in Virginia to troops that were stationed there and declared war against the entire world, against everyone. And thus there was that football player who made a t-shirt, "Everyone versus Trump," that became famous at that time, before Trump created another distraction away from it and everybody forgot about it. But on this date, Trump declared war against everyone. Everyone had to give loyalty to him, or you were the enemy. And he was going to cause problems. And shortly thereafter was the big cyclone that destroyed or decimated Southeast Asia, which was the precise area that Trump said would suffer if they did not give him loyalty. And so that becomes suspicious when you learn of HAARP, the weather machine. But I'm not going to get into that right now or discuss that. But yeah, you're aware that 2017 we had record-breaking hurricanes striking the United States and Puerto Rico, and it's not a coincidence. I'll put it to you that way. And yes, it does have to do with global warming in part, but global warming would indicate more patterned behavior than what we're witnessing as sporadic behavior. But then you had the cyclone bombs in the winter time of 2018, which were record-breaking. And then you had the North Carolina storm that happened not too long ago that caused major damage and flooding, and I haven't heard anything from the news about recovery efforts for that area. We heard Trump claim he was going to help out, but now that the floods, I think, have receded, I'm not hearing anything about rescue efforts and cleanup efforts and support efforts. People who are damaged by natural disasters need more than just a token truckload of food. They need constant daily care for months until they rebuild. And Puerto Rico still to this day has not been repaired fully. Still many people are without electricity. People are still dying as an indirect result of the hurricane. And so it's bad news what Trump did to throw in the paper towels at them. Okay, so let's move on to the next big sign that ties it all together, and that is September. Let's zoom back. Okay, September 21st, 22nd, and get the moon under the feet. Okay, there you go. There it is. Exactly as John the Revelator described it. The woman, Virgo, clothed with the sun, giving birth to Jupiter, the moon under her feet, and 12 stars as a crown on her head. The addition of Venus, Mars, and Mercury lined up with the star Regulus. And these stars are not performing their function as symbols of Trump and the leader of the U.S. Church, but it has to do with the organizational structure of this United States Church. And I'll just disclose it to you right here and now. It is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, stationed in Utah currently. They intended to establish Independence, Missouri as the New Jerusalem, the Zion, as prophesied in Scripture. But, just as the Egyptian prophecy and story, just as the story of Jesus, the leader of this church, Joseph Smith, was murdered. Just like Osiris, just like Jesus. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was shattered. Just like Jesus' church, just like the Egyptian church. There were over 80 different groups that emerged from Joseph's church, and Brigham Young is the Lucifer role, he's the Set role, he's the Judah betrayer role, who takes over the church and puts it into darkness, which religion calls it apostasy. And I've done plenty of books, and I've done some videos here on YouTube that help illustrate that Brigham Young, sure enough, is the fulfillment of the usurper who takes over the church and turns it all around into a dark and evil thing. Also of note, on September 23rd, 2017, was the last woman's session of General Conference for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's significant because this was when the new women's organization, they call it the Relief Society, they had a new presidency installed in the April conference, and so this was the first time that the new presidency, women's presidency, got to address the women of the church. And so it's highly symbolic to have this date with this fulfilling sign on the day of the last women's session of conference. And this church had 3 of their apostles die after the third lunar eclipse that occurred on their Saturday session of April conference back in 2015. And after that session of conference, boom, you have 3 apostles dying during that interim until the 4th lunar eclipse. And it's highly symbolic and has direct implication to the signs in the last days, as to indicate to the world which church the prophecies, ancient prophecies, are referring to. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is to collapse and needs to be restored, just like the government of the United States will collapse and will need to be restored. And Joseph Smith, by the way, knew all of this. And I won't get into it here in this video because this is going to be long enough as it is. Okay, so here's the sign of John the Revelator, chapter 12, of the sign of the woman giving birth to the man-child who is to rule the world. Okay, and then we have another sign in Revelation, and that occurred on a significant date. And Jews right now are all going wild wacko bonkers because they recognize this date in December. It is the 5th day of Hanukkah. And that has symbolism. Oops, I got the Julian calendar. This is part of Hanukkah. And on Hanukkah is the reference to the book of Maccabees, where the Maccabees take back the temple from the Greeks, who were offering pigs on the altar, which is a violation of the law of Moses. And so the Maccabees took back their temple and were able to restore the temple sacrifices. And there's the story of needing oil for the lamp in the temple, and the oil wasn't enough, they thought, but it lasted for 8 days. And it was a miracle. And it corresponded with the new moon. Thus, the 5th day always corresponds with the new moon. That's why Hanukkah keeps adjusting back and forth in the months as to when it occurs, so that it's not on a specific days of December or November or whatever. It corresponds with the new moon, so that the 5th day is on the new moon. And there you have the sign from John the Revelator of 5 additional celestial bodies at the tail of the serpent. The serpent is the constellation Serpens, with Ophiuchus in the middle. And we need to pull back a little bit. Realis on the crown of the serpent, with the number of stars as specified by John the Revelator. And again, a significant event. Also notice Jupiter, the man-child. He's at the top of the constellation Libra, which is the scales of judgment. This is significant because it goes back to the ancient Egyptians. In the ancient Egyptians, an initiate in their temple rituals, which involved both government officials as well as religious individuals, they had to go through this endowment process. And this was symbolism It was significant for preparation for the afterlife, and there were a scale of judgment involved in this ritual. And at the top of the scale was what the Egyptians called Ma'at, which is truth and order. And she is often portrayed in human form, but is also representation of the feather at the top of the scale. And it's a feather because that is how the heart is weighed. The heart had to be lighter than a feather. And you'd think that that's impossible. There's no way a heart could be lighter than a feather. And that is the case in the physical reality, but in the spiritual reality, it's a different concept. And so this is a spiritual ritual that is taking place. And so our heart is like our soul. Our soul has to be clean and pure and perfect, basically. So when Jesus says, "Be ye therefore perfect," he's referring to our hearts. He's not referring to our cooking ability or the ability in which we took care of our kids and made them all doctors, lawyers, and businessmen. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with heart, our spirit. And there you see Jupiter is at the top, representing Ma'at, the judge. You'll notice in the Old Testament that after Moses, he takes the house of Israel into the desert. He does not go into the promised land right away. And then when Joshua, which is Jesus in Greek, takes the house of Israel into the promised land, there is a period of judges, thus the book of Judges. And the book of Judges is the period before the coronation of King Saul, who then lost it and had to be replaced with King David. This all is symbolism from the Egyptians with Osiris, Set, and Horus. It's all symbolic. And in fact, one of the judges' stories is a direct Egyptianism and even includes symbolism for the last days. Samson. Samson is the name for the Sun King. Shemesh is the Hebrew word for sun. That's the Sems part of Samson. The N part is my discovery with Paleo-Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew utilized determinatives. And it's basically a single symbol that's attached to a word that functions as an adjective to describe what the type of word it is. So like you have a tree. We know there are lots of different trees. How can you identify which tree you're talking about? Well, you use an adjective. Oak tree, pine tree, apple tree, orange tree, etc. And the ancient way of determining which tree they were referring to, you'd put a picture of that particular tree. The N in Paleo-Hebrew, this was an alphabetical language, the first alphabetical language. And so you can't have all the myriad numbers of determinatives or pictures, and so it had to be condensed. And the N corresponded to king or kingdom, coming from the Egyptian crown of the northern Egypt. And I won't get into that, but I've published books on it. And again, if you're interested, I can send you a link, or I can give you my email, and I can email my book to you. Samson is the king's son, and he is a symbol of the man-child. The Jews call him the Jewish Messiah for the last days. And so, yes, the Jews should find this all interesting, because the Christians didn't have the information. They just deny the last days Jewish Messiah or Jewish Christ, because Osiris is a Christ. He is anointed. And in the temple ritual, the kings and initiates who go through it, they all get anointed to become kings, as well as the religious part, high priests. This is the ritual to obtain those offices. And so even though only one person becomes king of Egypt on earth, the symbolic concept was that after we die, we ascend to heaven and occupy a star or sun in the heavens as our base of operation. I won't get more into that, because again, that'll take too much time. I'm just trying to go over each of the signs for you. But here, the man-child, who is represented by Jupiter, is now a judge over the world. He is Dan in Hebrew. He is Samson in symbol. He is now warning the world of the coming destruction of the United States, and which would consequently turn to the rest of the world. It's destroyed, as prophesied. Okay. The next sign. On the 1st of January, 2018, we had a full moon. It was one of 2 full moons in the month of January. And so that becomes significant. You'll notice Mars. If we move it up, you'll see Mars is now at the top. So the leader of the Mormon church is now at the top. Why is he at the top? Because on the 2nd of January, and it was at 10, let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we have to go to 0, 0. Okay, so shrink this down, because we got to find the tail of the dragon sign. And where would it be? There's the full moon up at the top in Cancer. We need to get things switched around here. There she be. Alright, there you have Draco the dragon. And there you see the quadrantids, the meteor showers at the tail of the dragon. You recognizing sign of John's, he says, the stars of the heaven shall be cast from the tail of the dragon. And I believe they even use 1/3. And it's interesting to note that the quadrantids are a yearly meteor shower and are the 3rd largest meteor shower. So there you have that sign of John's. So we had the sign of the dragon on the dark day of Hanukkah back in December 2017, and then we had the birth on the 23rd of September 2017. So there's the signs of John the Revelator, all occurred, and those of you who are Mormon, you know exactly the significance of this date and time. This was when Thomas S. Monson, leader, president, prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, died. And as I showed you before, Mars is at the top of the Libra, the scales of judgment, because he's now replacing President Monson. But as this is not to be the case, it is supposed to be Jupiter who is supposed to take over the kingdom and thus the religion. But the church is apostasy, and therefore the wrong man is being ascended to the religious throne. And I'll show you later when he gets to Capricorn, the goat beast, the symbol of Lucifer himself, which is also a symbol in the heavens. As you look at it, it looks like a shofar horn. So it's a message constellation and represents a Luciferian message. So any constellation that's in front of it is part of that message. Okay, and then we'll go ahead to the 7th. Alright, anybody remember the Age of Aquarius song? Let's get it into focus. Center it at the screen here and blow it up for you. Okay. Alright. When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter and Mars are aligned, or something like that. That would be from my parents' generation. Well, it's in between my parents and my generation. It's the Age of Aquarius song. They talk about the Age of Aquarius occurring when the moon is in the 7th house, which is Virgo, and Jupiter and Mars are in conjunction with each other. And that occurred on January 7th, 2018. All within these other signs that are occurring. Now, this isn't too significant because apparently this sign has happened 3 times previous since the song came out. But it's significant in that it happened during all these other signs. Alright, so now let's jump ahead to the 31st, the second of the full moons in the month of January 2018, and let's back her up. Okay. The sun is in the goat beast, Venus is in the tail of the goat beast, and Mercury is at the mouth of the goat beast. And there's the moon at the mouth of Leo. And anybody remember what happened on January 31st, 2018? That's right. it was a total lunar eclipse, the sign of the moon turning to blood. So there you go. The sign of the sun, moon, stars, and all three signs, which included the star sign, in December Leonois Minorids just appeared. But all the signs have now occurred, and on February, I think it was 4th, was that the Super Bowl? Because on the day and time of the Super Bowl, there was an asteroid that passed between the Earth and the Moon, and this asteroid was the closest it's ever been. I believe it first appeared in 2002, and thus got its name at that point. And it came around at this time, and you'll notice that this is when Jesus talks about the sign of the Son of Man. Interestingly, Joseph Smith said of this sign of Jesus's, he said that some will say it is a comet, others a planet. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened for this asteroid. Some said it was a comet, and some said it was the planet. And you might think, planet? Who would think of it as a planet? Well, there are a number of people who refer to the ancient Sumerian text of Sumeria. Elki, I believe, is the author's name of the text on clay tablets, who indicated that he was a space alien or descended from space aliens, I can't remember which, and he came to Earth and they altered the DNA of pre-humans to make them human, and and they indicated that they would come back in the latter days, and so they apparently came from this particular planet. I can't remember the name of the planet, but there's a group of believers who had been posting on YouTube that this planet was getting near to Earth, and they were showing fake pictures of this planet, and everybody was getting fooled by it, but they thought that this comet was also that planet. And so there you have the fulfillment of prophecy with all of the signs from the Bible. And there you go. And yes, there are fuller explanations, because after the signs comes destruction. You know, like in the story of Noah, which Jesus refers to in Matthew 24. It says, as in the days of Noah, so shall be the second coming, which is not really the second coming. The author made a mistake, not understanding that it's the coming of the spiritual child of Jesus, the man-child of Revelation, who is to come and restore the kingdom of Jesus, which is both the government of the United States and the religion of the United States, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This man-child would come out of this corrupt church, this corrupt government. Thus, he would be a citizen of the United States and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. and he would warn the people of the signs in the heavens and of the events of the collapses of both the church and the government, and the destruction that would take place. And from the ashes he would rise as the phoenix bird on the primordial earth in the Egyptian creation story, and restore the kingdom. And so there you go. There's all the signs of the last days, and I'm sure you're like, what in the world are you talking about? I didn't understand this from my religion. They never told me this. That's wrong. Whatever. You guys don't study. You got to understand that the Bible, the book of Genesis, the Gospels, they all come from the Egyptian documents. And so if you're going to stick with what they control your mind with, you're going to be lost, and you're not going to understand what's going on. And you're not going to understand that when you're wearing the MAGA hat of Trump, you're wearing the sign of the beast in the forehead. And Trump is the image of the beast on TV, who, this idol image on a TV screen is speaking, and is speaking blasphemies. That's Trump. John knew it. He saw it. He recorded it. We're reading it. We now know it. This is it. These are the last days. And destruction will occur, and from the ashes the man-child will rise up and restore and build the kingdom of God on earth. So, hope you're prepared, and hope you figure it all out before it's too late.